in starting Equipment Share, I think we still made every mistake in the book. It'd be hard to find a mistake we didn't make. So I would just encourage people who moved on a path of creation that the way we label these things like mistake and failure are just so wrong. If we could recapture those words so they don't have a wrongness to it, then they're very useful. The most important thing is that your perspective is just deeply grateful to be breathing and creating.
Welcome to another episode of Outsider Inc. I'm your host, Ian Hathway. Today's guest is Willy Schlacks, co-founder and president of Equipment Share and one of the most intentional builders we've had on the show. Willy's story doesn't begin in a startup hub or around venture capital tables. He grew up in a cloistered environment in rural Missouri, a world with no private property, no personal ownership, and strict control over money and agency. Inside that environment, entrepreneurship didn't show up as ambition or status seeking, but as a curiosity, a way to engage with the world and learn how things worked. Alongside his brother Jabek, Willy began building real businesses at a young age, learning through necessity how to pre-sell, reinvest profits, and operate with discipline long before those ideas were fashionable. When Willy left that environment in his late 20s, he entered the capitalist world for the first time and effectively started over. That reset eventually led to Equipment Share, a company born not from chasing a hot market, but from lived experience as an operator, confronting work that was reactive, chaotic, and disconnected, and deciding it didn't have to stay that way. What began as a focused solution grew into a vertically integrated platform spanning technology, equipment, and services, scaling from a startup weekend idea in Missouri into one of the largest companies in its category. Along the way, Willy made a series of deliberate, values-driven choices, building outside of Silicon Valley, embracing constraint instead of comfort, choosing venture capital only when the problem demanded it, and just a few weeks ago, taking Equipment Share public at a $7 billion valuation while retaining long-term stewardship of the company. In parallel, he's investing deeply in founders building far from traditional tech centers through Redbud VC, helping shape the kind of ecosystem he believes great founders actually need. Today, we'll trace how those experiences shape the way Willy thinks about building, from why constraints matter, to how leadership evolves at scale, and what it means to stay close to the work as the stakes grow. Willy, welcome to Outsider Inc.
Thank you. It's quite the intro. Almost seems like we're done.
Well, you have an amazing story. I'm so excited to have you here. While reading and learning about you, a theme that kept surfacing was the importance of struggle. The idea that too much ease can be its own trap, and that meaningful progress often requires friction. Most people spend their lives trying to add comfort and remove struggle, but you do the opposite. So from your perspective, why do people so often misperceive the value of struggle? And in what ways have you seen it function as an advantage?
Yeah, you're going to the heart and soul of what it means to be human, which is an interesting topic for this day and age. I think comfort and struggle, for me, there's this innate common experience that I observe in myself and other people where we want ease and comfort. But the extreme boredom on the other side of that is very apparent. We can certainly observe humans who sort of accept maybe that reactive, here's comfortable environment, and then I'm forced into uncomfortable. And if life puts me there, I'm always trying to snap back to comfort. And that's generally fear driven. But when I look at things that are creative or built or movement, these are the patterns that really get me excited. So my experience of what is creative, what is movement, what's the dance, that's where it looks a lot more like music. And there's certainly a cadence to it, and there's harmony if we want to use that pattern. But it's where this human experience suddenly shifts away from a programmatic, we're all just doing a similar thing, to we are creators of something in the future. And the ability to create that future is something I think we underappreciate. And that's really what gets me excited about pursuing the north wind of discomfort versus the couch of, oh yeah, this feels good. Oh yeah, I like it. But I get bored very quickly. And I think everybody does. Everybody wants something more. Instead of life being lived, they find themselves in a bowling lane with the lanes up. It's a fun little game, but there's just so much more than that. It's just the exploration that I continue to discover every day, and I enjoy it. The only time things stop is when we're dead. So I'll have plenty of time to rest then.
I feel like actually we have an epidemic in society to avoid discomfort of any kind, avoiding short-term pain at all costs. So to make that idea a little more concrete, I'd love to rewind to the beginning. You grew up in a cloistered, highly structured environment in rural Missouri, one where money, ownership, and even personal agency worked very differently than how they do in the outside world, at least for most of us. Can you paint a picture of what daily life was actually like in that environment and how that way shaped how you think about work, independence, and building?
Well, first off, I feel so much gratitude. Like the lens I see just is filled with deeper gratitude. Now, I don't say that to negate pain or other people's experiences, because when I think about my early life, it was just in this environment that was definitely filled with certain things like fear and control. But for me, I don't shy away from or label those things as bad. It's like, no, that's part of this experience. This environment, yeah, it was very cloistered. Everything was controlled. When I was a kid, didn't really know anything outside of that. That was life. Everything was communal. There was no such thing as personal property. Well, if there were personal property, it was pretty small and tangible, like maybe your clothes. But even then, one of the calendars that we had kids was the clothes we would wear every day. And growing up in that, I never thought that that was unusual, of course, because you grow up in it. But I didn't expect to have agency over the clothes I wore. I just was like, yeah, everybody has a calendar and somebody's telling you what clothes you wear. It's just all I knew. And it's a funny flavor of the culture that I grew up in. But I think as a kid, those experiences can be very different than as an adult or as a mind that then starts to question and read and explore thoughts beyond a known environment. And I really credit my parents for my curiosity and my exploration because there was a very tight knit worldview that was imposed on us. Very tight knit, with a heavy dose of fear if you didn't comply with that worldview. But my parents were always like, yeah, I mean, this is it. But if you think it's something else, go explore it. Like they always had that release valve for me. And a lot of other folks there didn't. Like that was not an acceptable thought. And I took advantage of that and I really explored in my mind and encountered philosophy at a young age. And they sort of banned the public library, which made it all the more enticing to go discover books and to read things that were banned and wrong and evil. And I think that's where I also started to explore the concepts of, well, what is that? What is this human word of evil? And what is the word good? And what was the origination? Now, of course, in the environment I grew up in, there was an extreme wrapper of religion around all of that. And that was an unquestionable thing. You couldn't question it because if you question it, everything sort of crumbles. And it did teach me you could never label or consider curiosity as wrong. Curiosity to me is just, I'm like, yes, I'll be the wind in that sail, whether it's my kids or people I work with or whatever, because I experienced the fear of others when I would be curious. And what I quickly realized is that fear is just the caution tape to a question because all they're doing is saying, hey, your curiosity, you're about to step across my caution tape. And holy fuck, that's going to destroy my world. So please don't. So for me, when I would push on questions as a kid, and I really enjoyed it because I suddenly discovered that people would bristle up and it was meaningful to them. And I would push on their views of religion or the why of life or what is life. And I didn't do it in the sense of I was right. I did it with questions. And I started to learn that you can discover so much with a question. And you had very little to discover if you had the answer. And it was those early experiences where I started to at least subconsciously appreciate that being right about things is the most freaking boringest thing on earth. Not knowing is just the adventure that you want to be on. And as soon as you absorb something and it feels right, like, okay, chuck it back there because it's no longer interesting. And you want to build on it. The theme and the movement of life. And where I found as a kid that whether I would sneak off and go to the library and get books and feel guilty about it because it was wrong, but at the same time, deep inside myself, start to form and question, why is this wrong? And there was a lot of control around, particularly relationships and interactions. If they controlled the clothes we would wear, they probably controlled everything else, as you can imagine. But also to know that it didn't matter to me. Like what I enjoyed as a kid was the things everyone enjoys, friendship and playing and all these other things. And I can remember that and taste it and also remember and think about the times where there was fear and darkness and all these other things. And I appreciate the complexity of that.
That's very fascinating. I wrote this down. Fear is a caution tape to a question. I haven't heard that one before. You mentioned things you were curious about, books, philosophy. Something else was entrepreneurship. But for you, more of a channel for curiosity more than ambition. Maybe it's not what you were calling it in your mind, entrepreneurship, but what do you remember about some of those early experiences, tinkering, building businesses? What were you trying to do? Were you trying to access knowledge, freedom, control, meaning? What was inspiring you?
To be able to create, that was the heart and soul of it. You have a fairly controlled environment, and I think this is true of any human. There's something inside of us we want to express, we want to build, we want to create something. And whatever that medium is, we're going to lean into it. But for building businesses, it was creation. We didn't even think of it as really building a business, even though we were. And I was fairly young when we started some of those efforts. My brother was 6 years older than me. So he was always more responsible and doing the adult things. And I was like literally a kid, just coming along for the fun of it. Now, obviously, as we both got older, we had some fairly sizable business ventures going on. But the unique aspect of it is we didn't keep any of the money because it all went to this environment. And that didn't bother us. We never thought about it. We wanted to make money. It was like that's the thing of whether we're succeeding or failing. But actually having the money was meaningless to us. We never had experienced that. There was certainly no driver beyond the fact that it was fuel for the next thing. But yeah, creating was amazing. And I loved whatever the medium was. It was incredible. But there was so much risk to this creation of building a business because suddenly we would find ourselves outside this environment in a whole new world that we call them the others or whatever. It's like, well, these are the people that are outside and they're paying us money. And so what do they want? And you start to get to ask these questions about making stuff people want. And what if the stuff that you make is stuff you enjoy? And so a lot of our early businesses had flavors of construction and craft and service things and whatnot.
You mentioned going outside. Eventually you did. You left at age 27, which was not just a physical move, but a full reset. You were already married. You already had a child. You're stepping out into this totally different world. You mentioned your brother, Javik. He left as well. And along the way, the two of you have built everything together. I'm curious about that partnership. How did it form so early? And why do you think that particular division of trust and responsibility has held up across decades of building companies together?
My brother Javik, he's ridiculously high integrity person. For him, it's a very binary world. For me, it's a very fluid musical world. And so the reason it works so well, though, is because we had always had a different perspective of everything, but ultimately a very similar route and a very similar outcome. So through that understanding, we knew that there was nothing hidden. There was nothing inauthentic about our engagements. Like when you engage with another human who is authentic, it's magic. You just win the lottery at that moment and you're like, okay, let's stay connected for as long as we can and whatever this experience is going to give us, whatever that relationship might be. It might be a spouse, a sibling, a business partner, whatever. But we've all had experience of encountering humans where we discover the inauthenticity. And the older we get, we're like, shit, I don't want to spend time with that. So yeah, my brother is so insanely authentic to a core that it made it really easy. We didn't even think about it. It's like, of course, who else would we do business with?
Well, it's not always such an obvious answer. In fact, many people would never do business with family members, but I think it's a testament to the relationship that the two of you have. One of the components of that has been clear boundaries on responsibilities. You've described in the past having this consistent split where he sort of runs operations and you're more focused on customer and product. How did you discover that division and does it ever break down?
Oh, it always breaks down. Yeah. It was just leaning into our strengths. I definitely love the ambiguity. Whatever is ambiguous and unknown, that's where I love to run to. Javik, he does not quit. He's ruthless. He's also a detailed operator. Everything has to be a known quantity in his world. So these two lenses that we had on the world really created strengths for him when it comes to operations and execution. And then for me, you can have five things that are all true at once. Like most people would struggle with that. But for me, it's just an interesting puzzle. But for his world, I would say he has to collapse those things. Like reality has to collapse into something. And he's much better at that than I am in the operational side of the business because everything does have to collapse into something. Whereas I'll sit there with my team and go, well, there's multiple possibilities. And they're like, well, what the hell are we supposed to do with that? Can't really do tomorrow with that type of response. So our strengths is what ultimately led us to handling different parts of the business or businesses as we were building them.
Good compliments. That's important in any business partnership. I want to, of course, get to equipment share in a minute, but before we do that, we've kind of hinted that you and Jabik have built multiple businesses before equipment share, not tech, not venture. These were real businesses with customers and cash flowing. You reinvested profits, stayed close to your customers. What were the core operating lessons that were forged during that time period that still shape your decisions today? And then maybe conversely, what lessons did you have to unlearn when you were building at scale?
Yeah, we did some technology things too. Like even in that environment we grew up in when I was a kid, I first encountered computer programming. I didn't even know it was computer programming at the time. So we did a bunch of different things, including trying to start a technology company. It then got shut down when they realized what the internet was. Jabba got put on church discipline, but we were always pushing the envelope. I don't know how many businesses we started before Equipment Share, but quite a few in a lot of different domains. What I would say, your question of what did we learn, even in starting Equipment Share, I think we still made every mistake in the book. It'd be hard to find a mistake we didn't make. So I would just encourage people who moved on a path of creation that the way we label these things like mistake and failure are just so wrong. If we could recapture those words so they don't have a wrongness to it, then they're very useful. The most important thing is that your perspective is just deeply grateful to be breathing and creating. Doesn't matter if the thing that you did yesterday looks a little dumb compared to the thing you know now. That should be an obvious thing that should be occurring, just the movement and progress of thought. Because, yeah, you'd think after we build all those companies, we'd maybe do less things that people would observe as mistakes. But no, for us, it was learning. It was fun. So if I were advising people that, hey, based on everything you learned, what's important in business and all this stuff, first and foremost, it's derivative of you. You can't escape yourself. If you are not authentic with yourself, you're going to be screwed up. This is the barrier. You're that doorway to something where it just feels so amazing, or you have regret and these other types of emotions that are completely unnecessary to live with. Completely unnecessary. It is a choice, even when it doesn't feel like it. It starts with you. I didn't realize that till much later on. Pursue yourself. Give yourself a break too. Just because you love money and you wonder if you shouldn't, who the flip cares? Love money. Because as soon as you get it, you're going to want to love something else, and that's okay. The way in certain societies we apply a moral wrapper around the things we chase is not helpful. It actually just creates this divergence from the reality of what we feel. So embrace the feelings, embrace the internal knowing, and whatever your future is, it's going to be mind blowing versus the level of control or the conformance that you want to bring to your life. That's probably what I am deeply grateful for about my upbringing is that I learned early on to not conform. I loved being an iconoclast. I think if I had grown up in what we would call normal, and it'd be quite a struggle. Like the biggest struggle to humans in this day and age is a moderately middle class or wealthy, easy upbringing. That's something I'd find challenging to surmount. And I worry about that with my kids. I'm just putting so much barrier in front of them. They're going to have to be superhumans to get to the other side of it.
That's great. I agree with that. I want to switch gears, if we could, to Equipment Share. What eventually became Equipment Share was not about chasing a market opportunity, but confronting something that you and your brother kept running into over and over again as contractors. Job sites were reactive, chaotic, and disconnected. So what was the moment that you realized this wasn't just your problem, that it was a systemic issue, a failure across the industry? And then secondly, once you realized this, how did you actually take steps towards solving this problem for other people?
We assume everyone else is more organized than us, but we also could observe that even that perception of maybe they're better than we are still was a leaps and bounds from any contemplation of an industry moving forward and leveraging this whole digital world that had developed since late 60s, 70s. Everything still was incredibly analog within another set of friction and duplication within certain digital realms. The chaos of an industry that is job-based, I mean, there's other job-based industries, but nothing at the scale of construction where you have 14 trillion of stuff that moves towards a job-based environment, because a job or a project is a proof of concept. It's very different than manufacturing or retail or any type of other industry that you sort of refine the same thing over and over again. You still have a lot of challenges in any environment of building a business, but when the outcome is once a proof of concept, like you build the bridge or the building or the tunnel or the house, it's like, yeah, you're not going to do that again. You sort of have to deconstruct into the things that you will do again. But the whole digital revolution, what it could enable, and what we believed was that even with all these challenges in construction and with an industry and humans that could absolutely still build stuff and keep getting better, but it was all analog driven, the digital side was not helping for the built environment. Now, different for a design phase when you design something that can absolutely be translated to largely digital, but the built environment, you're dealing with this physical realm. And if we wanted support and enhancement from these digital tools, then you had to have a platform approach, was our belief. And because things weren't wired up like a manufacturing site or a farm or retail, you had to have a platform and primitives in that digital world that could contemplate this crazy, flexible, chaotic movement of goods and services and entities interacting. And was a bit of a macro observation because we could observe and had deep experience in this industry for decades. We knew what it felt like to be chaotic. And we also knew that nothing was changing, even as tools were showing up. We also felt certain severe pain points that felt emblematic of this problem that could be alleviated if a solution existed, if a platform existed. And one of our most severe points was equipment rental, which is why we started in that space. We never started the company with a thought of this is our domain and this is the end. The day we started the company, or even when we started thinking about it, it was always a macro problem of, well, how big is this entire thing? And we wanted to find our landing pad, but we never constrained the thought to that. We've been thinking about this for our whole lives, but the spark that launched it, we had a bunch of jobs going on. And there was one project that was ridiculous in its intensity, its schedule. And it was a big, huge utility project, 16 feet underground. And we were connecting live sewer and water and all this stuff. And I remember it was freezing cold day. It was raining. Jabbok was 16 feet underground doing a live sewer connection. And we couldn't find the equipment we needed. So we had to go rent some stuff and combine this whole environment where it was such a specific, high intensity, urgent thing. We were constantly sending people to go rent stuff. And by the end of it, everything was fine. It all got figured out like it always did. We were just problem solvers. Didn't matter what the problem was. It was like, of course, we'll solve the problem. But we could sort of reflect and go, what a shitstorm, literally and figuratively in this case. And I remember at that point, he's like, we have to do something. Like, this is so freaking insane. It was everything from the economics of the rental provider that we were working with to the lack of their organization to the lack of our organization. Nothing was measurable, is what it felt like. So it all required superhuman effort on our part. And we felt like that was fairly similar for most companies we encountered in the industry. You had some amazing superhuman people that could practically do anything. But if you're always relying on superhumans, can't we alleviate that somehow? Can't they progress past being the tip of the spear every single day? There's a level of excitement around developing a craft and such ability. And I think that's going to be more common in the future as we create tools that let humans focus on craft. Humans want to be creating. They want a new frontier. They don't want to necessarily be doing the repetitive things every single day. If this problem is solved, let's not solve it again type thing. So that next week is when we really got intense about, okay, we're going to build something that is solving this problem. We just had a visceral understanding of the disconnection that was present in our industry.
So early on, you understood the pain, but while maybe the vision was clear, you had to find where the real leverage was. So do you remember in those early days, you've got the vision, but something is not quite landing? What exactly was wrong, and where did you learn about where real leverage lived?
I think because we've been doing this since we were kids, we didn't even think about this beyond just a subconscious intuitive sense that if you're going to do something in this capitalistic environment, you have to ask, what do people want, and give it to them. You have to earn the right to creating a better solution. We never even thought about the option of, hey, let's build something and raise money. And if it works and people like it, great. And if it doesn't, that's fine. We couldn't even contemplate, how could you not go talk to somebody and they say, hey, I want this. You have to do it. We just wanted to do it in a way that had a perspective that would evolve towards alleviating all this chaos that we experience. So we knew technology would be part of it, but it was just part of it. We never thought about the isolation of build software and leave the dirty work to other people. Of course, we're going to shoulder more than our customers. That was just an intuitive, innate, visceral feeling we had. Now, I would say later on, investors could not comprehend why the hell we were shouldering this vertical approach. And they were frequently suggesting that we pivot, only do software, and or get rid of this other chaotic stuff. But obviously, we never did, and we couldn't contemplate those things. I don't want to say it's because we were smart or anything. We just happened to go, all right, we got a customer, but guess what? We're also more interested in solving a $14 trillion industry problem versus just their one thing. And for us, that was new, which is why we then had to go raise money and go down the path we did.
Dealing with investors, raising money, one of your earliest experiences with that, you and your brother spent time inside Y Combinator early on, which also meant spending time inside the Silicon Valley way of building and doing things, right? The pace, the assumptions about the need for capital, growth, talent. Why did you decide to go to YC, and what did being in that environment teach you about how companies can be built?
We had never heard of YC. We bumped into Wade from Zapier, and he heard what we were building. He's like, you guys should go to YC. And we're like, well, what is YC? Looked it up online and like, okay, yeah, we'll give that a shot. Applied and got in. There was no strategic thought to that. And as far as raising money, we had never raised money for a business before. We always just built a business with nothing and then used the profits to grow it. That was all we knew. So encountering this world of people will give you money and you really haven't built something felt very weird and odd. But also, it's like, wow, that's pretty cool. But we perceived it as sort of taking advantage of the system. It's like other people would literally go say something and then raise money on the thing they said. Like, there's nothing real with that, but people are giving them money. And that felt weird. But that was the bubble we suddenly encountered in San Francisco. But I do remember seeing that and just having a slight moment of, oh, I wonder if we've just always been doing it wrong. And maybe that's really how the world works. But of course, our gut couldn't ever escape the raw reality of just building value and doing stuff. So we never really experimented with the fantasy of raising money and the option of failure. I use failure only in the term of when you stop trying, like to raise money from somebody and then to tell them a year later, hey, I learned a lot, but your money's not there. That's incomprehensible to me. But I watched a ton of people do that. Like, to me, that feels like the couch. It's just so easy to go, hey, I'm going to stop exploring that hard adventure because I'd rather have this couch and that $1 million you gave me. Thank you. I learned a lot. Like, what the fuck? I mean, if a founder actually said that, like, okay, now I have a definition of failure and that's it.
Yeah.
So that's what we encounter a lot of in San Francisco. And that was a bit mind blowing to see people so cavalier about the promise and the facade of as if they are an adventurer. And then they open the door and it's a little cold outside and then they close it real quick and go, okay, yeah, let's end this adventure. I'm just,
It's a very unique and special place. I think a lot of what you're describing is resurfacing now in the AI boom. But you made a very conscious decision to return home to Missouri. What gave you the conviction to build Equipment Share in Missouri rather than staying inside of that Silicon Valley gravity? I mean, I have to think that many people, or at least some people around you, were discouraging your choice to do that, especially investors. But what gave you the confidence to do it anyway?
definitely most people thought it was a foolish choice. And I don't discredit them for that at all, because they're probably just working off pattern recognition and other things. The reason we did it is a pretty simple answer, though, and it's simply because it was home. I love the concept of home. because home has different gradients to it, but it has a feeling of constraint, has a feeling of walls, has a feeling of ritual. Because even choosing a home, people don't realize the choice of home is not really ultimately home because you're manufacturing something that loses a depth and a root to it. So the easy answer and the authentic one is it was simply home. Like we never thought about it. And the older I get, the more I deeply appreciate the concept of home. And not that you can't move homes either. Like, because I left an environment when I was 27, and it's not like home has to hold you in that sense. Like life will move you through it, but that's my point is life pulls you through. Whether you find yourself in a stream and then you're up on a rock or wherever, life has a way of saying this is it. And you can sort of feel it in your gut. And you know when you're migrating to look for something else. But if you sit down and go, okay, I want good weather, palm trees, beach, this, that, whatever, and then you go there, that's the easy couch. And the people that I observe who do that don't have the same depth and sense of the home feel. Now, it doesn't mean they can't enjoy it, but because it is easy, they will get bored. Not that wrong. I like traveling. I like a beach, but I do know that a good 7 days into my travel indulgences, I am fucking bored. Home, I just cannot imagine. Like the ritual of when I wake up, my wife and I are awake in the morning and it's still dark outside, and then we start the fire, then we have coffee. Holy freaking hell. That's so much more enticing to me than a 7 day trip in the Bahamas. Home is just such an underappreciated thing. And I don't mean that in the sense of a control perspective. I mean, sometimes life drops you somewhere and you find roots there, and it's great. And sometimes you're uprooted and then you find roots elsewhere. But it's like life chose versus me putting the list down of comforts.
You don't have to move somewhere for a job or to build a company. You should feel most equipped to build that company where you feel most at home. Coming back from the valley, you also made a very conscious choice not to optimize for comfort or abundance, but to keep operating inside of real constraints. Some of that is a function of where you're building the company. You've talked about scarcity not as a tax or a hindrance, but as a forcing function that actually builds resilience. Tying this back to the idea of struggle as a key ingredient, how did choosing to build in Missouri actually shape how you operated day to day? Where did struggle show up as a strategic advantage rather than just a circumstance?
I think it enabled us developing scalable processes and scale far quicker than we would have if we were in a low constraint environment. Say we decided, hey, New York's great, or Southern Florida or whatever. Those markets are so big that we wouldn't have had to really figure out scale and remote because our ambitions were global. So a big part of what is underappreciated when you have a brick and mortar aspect to your business is store number two. And if that's just next door, you're not really doing scale. Like you have to figure out all your systems and process for scaling people and hiring. And when you're not there to solve the problem, how does the business continue on? How does culture emerge that's far beyond and impactful than you as an individual? Like when I think about my brother in the 16-foot trench doing live sewer, okay, superhuman, great. But guess what? I can't clone him, put him around. So you have to then develop a culture and a company and process that is sort of starting to replicate not only the operational, but also the technological side of this. So it was a huge advantage that our home is not a big market. It is the smallest market we're in currently. So very quickly we had to expand outside of the known. And if you look at what we achieved, and I just mean this from a data perspective, scaling in the industry, nobody in the history had ever done that scaling. Like you had constraint of a balance sheet and just quantity of locations. Nobody's ever done that. Now, it's not because we were rocket scientists. It's simply because we had this constraint of small market and we had an ambition of the whole industry. There was no plateau of, oh, okay, if we get to this revenue or we get to this thing, we're sort of done. Like even right now, we haven't remotely approached done. It's like when you see your destination on the horizon, like you keep driving for 6 hours, it's still not closer. 10 hours, that destination is not closer, which is fun because all the stuff that's around us in our purview is different and exciting. But I love having a destination that's so freaking far out that there is no foot off the gas. But yeah, the constraint of having a small market was a huge advantage because we were forced to figure out scale very early and did. There's a lot of lessons and things and tactics that we learned, not because we were so brilliant, but because the vision and our view of what we're building forced us down that path.
So you mentioned the goal is always in the horizon. You're never reaching that destination. You've had some really big news. Let's call it a milestone, a huge milestone. Equipment Share just became a public company listing on the NASDAQ at a $7 billion valuation. It's an incredible accomplishment to be celebrated. And I have to think that that moment on the NASDAQ platform was surreal and a defining moment in your life. But as you said, you've been very clear about going public. This is not an exit for you. It's a tool. You see public markets as faster, cheaper, more transparent way to access capital so that the company can continue growing and serving customers at scale around the globe. How do you personally think about the trade-offs of becoming a public company? And what do you think founders misunderstand about what actually changes and what doesn't when you cross that line?
We learned a ton through that process. This wasn't part of the plan, but almost nothing was. So let me just put that out there. Now, being public, I think my brother and I enjoyed watching that experience through other people's eyes, probably more than our own, because we felt deeply that the year-long effort of work to go public wasn't that useful to our customers. And that always makes us uncomfortable when we're doing things that are not useful to customers. Now, in the grand scheme of things, it was necessary and it will absolutely be able to help serve customers. But the actual emotional content of experiencing it was super exciting to see through other people's eyes, like our family, like having our parents there. My mom and dad really aren't big city people, and having my mom and dad there and my mom on the podium when we pushed the button. And she had no expectation. She didn't even freaking know what was going on until she showed up and she was like, "Oh, what? What are we doing? Oh, this is great." And she was our biggest cheerleader. And my dad, when we started the company, he was our first driver. It's a family business type thing. Like there was so much trust and belief in what we did and our deep appreciation for what they did for us that watching that come together was a really cool moment. The whole year of preparation was less cool. And then the moment after was wonderful because now we're back to work and we really love that. It does feel like we've got more ability from just a resource perspective to keep the foot on the gas towards that thing in the horizon that hasn't moved an inch. Because if our goal is this massive industry, we are so early on this effort that there's no stopping.
Well, speaking of building, which is what you've done your whole life, alongside of building Equipment Share, you've also been very intentional about building the startup ecosystem in Missouri. First, you founded Scale, which later became Redbud VC, investing your time, your capital, and your attention into founders building companies far from the coasts. It's not just a side project for you. It's deeply tied to how you think about company building and leadership. What was the gap that you saw in the Missouri ecosystem that made you feel like this kind of founder first platform needed to exist? And why do you feel it's important for you to help to build it locally rather than backing companies far and wide?
Well, we back companies anywhere. Like our constraint is it's maybe flipped from what most VCs would do. So like most VCs have a domain, a region, a focus that's more outward facing. We put the constraint on ourselves where our constraint is here's home, so we're going to do it here. Didn't really think about any other option. We weren't trying to create ease for us. And then even raising money, this is an unnecessary constraint, but one we put in ourselves. We'd rather only take money from people that we resonate with. And that is because of some super negative experiences I had with investors. And I'm not saying this carte blanche, like I met so many good investors and I deeply appreciate our investor base writ large. However, there are some anecdotes of just people that we made a tremendous amount of wealth for that are incredibly antagonistic and intent on our destruction. And that was puzzling to us. And it took me a while to come to reconcile the fact that some humans are a little different. Whatever made them different, point being that humans don't change for other people, they change for themselves. And if they're not interested in that, then guess what? They're not interested in that. So it does matter to me where we raise money from, that is Constraint. I want to resonate with those folks. So if somebody shows up with 100 million bucks and there's not that resonance and there's a question of that alignment, life's too short for that. The outcome is not money. There's something far more interesting and impactful. Money is really the fuel. We put the constraint on ourselves, but there is no constraint in who we invest in. And for that reason, a lot of our companies are all over. Now, the fact that we are here and there is access to those resources for folks who are in the Midwest is really cool because when I was raising money for Equipment Share back in 2015, there just wasn't an awareness and an ecosystem. So I like the fact that that's there, but I also don't want to make a virtue out of that. It's literally, again, the answer is home. That's the only reason why I like those constraints. And venture is an amazing source of capital that's fairly new in the grand scheme of history. By and large, it's a very healthy thing for creators who want to create. And I'm happy to be part of it. Like I feel very fortunate, like everything else in life. This is fun. I think we're following the footsteps of a lot of phenomenal people here.
You mentioned creators. I think it comes down to people. I imagine you would agree where the focus at Redbud in evaluating founders and companies is less on pitch decks and traction metrics and polished narratives and more about the founders, right? Their judgment, their resilience, their capacity to grow, their coachability. A lot of venture funds say they do that, but the reality is they default to pattern matching, surface signals, and social proof consensus, really. So what did you feel was fundamentally broken about how early stage founders are evaluated? And when you're meeting founders today, what are the qualities that immediately pull you in?
I don't know if anything is broken about the overall industry, but I would say that people who deploy capital, the way they deploy capital is reflective of themselves. So a lot of people do it very successfully, but some people are great at raising money. And then when it comes time to deploy it, what capacity and experiences do they have to really do that where they're going to create a phenomenal return for their investors? So what I felt is that we bring ourselves to the table and that's it. So the abilities and the outcome of what we will create, that's the constraint there. But being an investor, I would say it's the easiest job on freaking planet Earth. I imagine this is the way actors feel too. Now, it doesn't mean there aren't fun challenges, but when I stack it up to all the other jobs I've done, like this one's super easy. And what that makes me want to do is lean even more into what is hard and what really can create the outcome that I want. Because I feel this obligation as an investor. It's too easy when it's my money. When it's other people's money, I really lean in more. I like the risk of that because it's actually much harder for me and requires more work and effort and thought and attention when it's other people's money. So I think the fact that we were able to raise money is what's really created this maturity in our venture world. I love the pressure of that, but what we look for is pretty challenging because what I know will create phenomenal returns for our investors is if we pick founders who have resilience to a degree that is abnormal, and that cannot be tested unless you have time. So one thing we love is when we have a lot of time with these companies. So our effort, we do a tremendous amount of work to get early into the conversation, even before a founder would ever be thinking about raising money. Now that's very hard. So we do a lot to make that happen. And so I think that's a whole part of our venture efforts that's fairly unique. I don't see a lot of other venture efforts doing that. They prefer almost to wait for the symptom of success. But what we know is that if you're waiting for the symptom of success, your return profile goes down substantially. Now, your risk goes down too, potentially. It depends on what people call success. But if you can discover resilience and these attributes that we know always equal an outcome that's quite remarkable, if you can discover that early on, you're doing phenomenal. So that's where we keep trying to push the boundary. But fundamentally, what we're bringing to the table is decades of building companies. So whether it's assessing the company or just helping them, I'll put helping in quotes because I don't really think a good creator, a good founder needs help. I don't literally mean that in the sense that they couldn't take advice or something. I mean that in the sense that help ultimately sort of steals an experience from them. It steals the learning, and that's a double-edged sword. So I often find myself telling founders, "Oh yeah, here's what I did," and all this stuff, and then I sometimes have to catch myself going, wait, what am I trying to do? Giving them the fast path to success? There's no such thing. Like, this is about them, their internal growth. When they're lying awake at night, they're afraid of something. That's magic. The only question is, are you going to fucking quit or pursue it? Are you going to start to discover that this adventure can be enjoyed versus, oh my God, this is too stressful and that's a little cold outside. And let me tell everybody I learned some lessons. And that is really hard to surface in a human because everybody is going to say they have it. So you're really approaching the conversation with, okay, I already know you say you have it, and I'm trying to figure out if that's real. You're questioning the very core of what somebody says is true. And you're going, I'm not sure. I'd love to believe that, but let me dig deeper. Let me try to suss this out because it's not the words that are going to tell me, it's the other things. And I can't give up all that now because if founders hear me say it and then they show up, they're just going to say the words again. I have to come up with new tactics.
It's an amazing lens. We think a lot about this. My partner, Jonathan, and I, we've kind of used the frame execution risk. Like, how can we filter that better? But it's really, we're trying to say the same thing. How do you know if people have the grit and the ability to overcome these immense challenges? So look, you've spent your life deliberately choosing hard paths, building in constraint, embracing struggle, staying close to the work. 20 years from now, what do you hope you can look back to and say, that was a job well done?
Couldn't predict that at all. But the feelings I'm hoping to experience in 20 years are going to be reflective of a mindset I have at the moment. So I can't escape the fact that what has continued to feel deeper and better only grows in magnitude. And that is the ritual I experience with close relationships. The depth of that just gets deeper. That movement of ritual with relationship is definitely going to be the thing. And the ability to create on the other side of this, like the medium and the environment, all that, that's hard to predict 20 years in the future. But the theme of creation certainly isn't going to change. But the people you deal with, that's where satisfaction starts to really set in. And it's not just the creation, because ritual is this flip side of creation. Ritual says, I'm going to do the exact same damn thing every single fill in the blank, whether it's day or whatever the ritual cadence is. But the thing that brings meaning to it is the relationship, whether it's one with yourself or someone else. And you want to invite people to that. So it's this beautiful other side of the coin of life where you have part of your life, you just run into the unknown. And then the other part is so known, but that knowing part of it, the comfort of it, gives you this exploration of things that are below the surface. So I think in 20 years, I hope that the depth of both these sides that I appreciate. I'm better at in the sense of like the natural motion of a dancer or a figure skater or whatever. When you see the number of reps they get, it's just so easy, but it doesn't change the delight in it because you keep doing it. You just have such a fluid motion through those things where when you first try it, whether it's a ritual or creation, it's pretty awkward. But if you get the bug, you don't stop.
I love all of your visuals. You're such a visual explainer of things. I can't think of a better way to end, but before I let you go, we have a little segment called Beyond the Bio. These are just some quick hit, quick answer questions that kind of let listeners get to know you beyond your resume. Does that sound okay?
Sure.
Okay. What's a quick piece of advice from a mentor that stuck with you throughout your journey?
All my mentors are dead people in books, so I must caveat with that.
Amazing. The best mentors.
Like Thoreau, an impression that he was describing how instead of pursuing life, life pursues us. And I love that because we get surprised. It taps us on the shoulder and we're like, oh shit, I'm where I never thought I would be versus I'm running after the thing that we think we need to pursue.
Oh, that's beautiful. Who is an unsung hero in your life and what has been the impact they've had on you?
Too many, but this ties closely in with my persons and my rituals. My wife is the center of that universe. I'm constantly pursuing her. Like even when I dress in the morning, I'm only thinking about she's going to be attracted to this, I bet. My wife's name is Caitlin. So many things that I do and I'm excited to do, they're inextricably linked to me trying to woo her constantly. Like every day, it feels like an adventure for me. She has a cafe that is one of her businesses. So part of my ritual most mornings is to go by her cafe. And sometimes she's there early in the morning because she still loves the obsession of creating product. But I show up and if I'm looking nice and all that, it's like, she is a gravity in my life that I revolve around and hope never to escape from that gravity well. And eventually I might get absorbed in it, but yeah, for now it's something that keeps me trapped in a good way.
Yeah.
Her story is freaking insane too. Like even that story of that cafe, which 20 years from now, it will just have a life of its own, but yeah, it's pretty cool.
What's a strongly held belief you hold today that most people would disagree with?
Take any one of those off the shelf, and I think I'd find an army of folks that would be on the opposite side. My current one that I think most people would struggle with and disagree with, which I like because I want to evolve this view, is just fundamentally what truth is. And I think most people force themselves in a corner where truth has to have some binary meaning to it. Like at the end of the day, something is true or false. And my view is that we're still dealing with extracted concepts and that truth is not binary and truth is movement. Now, whenever I bring that up, I always get the classic, well, what about Hitler and what about this? And people very quickly subscribe truth and evil and good and all these same things. But my belief that truth is motion is probably the opposite of what most people would lean into.
Tell us something most people don't know about you. Something outside of work, could be a hobby, favorite travel spot, a guilty pleasure, or maybe even a hidden talent.
I like being healthy. I like working out and all this stuff. But when I'm lifting weights, the motivation for lifting that weight, I'm like, I'm doing this because I want to look good. But I think I should be doing it because I want to feel good. At its core, I'm like, okay, I'm just doing this for pure vanity. But I know there's a lot of other good reasons to do it. But I'm like, if the vanity wasn't there, would I do it? And I'm not sure I would. I think I am purely vain in this effort because what I really want to do is not lift weights. I want my life to have so much motion and activity to it that I don't need to lift weights. But it doesn't. Like I'm sitting at this desk talking to you and you're talking to me. Yeah, we're sort of vegetating at the moment. But what if we were swinging an anvil, making some cool sword? Like we wouldn't be lifting weights. I haven't expressed this before, but since you asked the question, I observe an extreme vanity in this effort of moving this bar and steel around that is somewhat humorous to me because I see everybody else saying it's for other reasons. So I think there's probably some childhood trauma wrapped up in that I haven't deeply explored yet.
What are one or two songs you'd like to add to our Spotify Founders playlist? Something that fuels your workday or has inspired you on your journey as an entrepreneur?
Music is deeply impactful to me. Most things in my life I generally subconsciously associate to music and the pattern of music. Even morality to me is simply music, not in the literal sense, but from a pattern perspective. As far as songs that are part of entrepreneurial journey, I don't know. I don't think any of us appreciate the depth that harmony and discord and cadence have. And we see it as a thing that's more entertainment. We don't realize that this thing rules it all. To TLDR is the entrepreneurial side of my or building and whatever is not something that, I've got my playlist.
I feel like then my next question is going to open up a whole other can of worms. What's a book you might recommend to a founder? Maybe something that helped you on your journey, maybe something that every first time founder should read as they're getting started.
I think Range is a good book for a founder to understand
Great
that,
book.
yeah, don't sweat it if you're not the expert. And being the expert is a disadvantage. And most founders are not experts. So, pat yourself on the back because you're in the right mindset. That's a great one.
Okay, last question. If you could give one piece of advice to someone who's about to start their first company today, particularly someone who's maybe a bit of an outsider, what would it be?
Better not be tomorrow. Like, God damn it, do it. Because what the hell are you waiting for? And there's absolutely nothing that would stop you. And if there is, then go find another job. And that's okay. But if you want to do the thing, then do it. Like we just don't realize the amount of control we have over today. And that's also all we have. I'm talking to myself here, by the way, too. But yeah, if somebody wants to do something, what the fuck? I mean, why is this a conversation for tomorrow?
Yep. Go get it. Well, speaking of conversations, this was an awesome one. Willy, thank you so much for being here today, sharing your journey and your amazing insights. I can't wait to share this with our listeners.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a pleasure to talk. And thank you so much for being a storyteller. Storytellers have one of the largest impact on my life. So I deeply admire the trade, and I've never done it. So this is cool when I encounter the folks that do it.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Outsider Inc. A big thank you to Willy Schlacks for joining us and sharing his fascinating story. Willy's journey is a reminder that constraint isn't the enemy of building, it's the engine. No outside ecosystem, no inherited playbook, no comfort to fall back on. Just the discipline to stay in motion and the belief that the friction is the point. What lingers for me is how deeply the concept of home permeates through everything he's built. Not as a limitation, but as a root system. You build better when you're planted somewhere real. And if there's one thing Willy would want you to take away, it's this. Stop waiting. The only thing standing between you and the thing you want to build is the story you're telling yourself about why today isn't the day. If you want more from Outsider Inc., don't forget to subscribe to the platform at outsiderinc.substack.com. It's packed with highlights from today's episode and bonus insights you won't want to miss. You can follow Outsider Inc. on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn at Outsider Inc. Pod. You can also follow me on X at Ian Hathway. Outsider Inc. is produced by Spellbinder Media. We'll be back soon with another fascinating outsider conversation. Until then, thank you so much for listening, and remember, great entrepreneurs can come from anywhere. See you next time.